The rain had been falling since morning, and by evening the streets were filled with puddles that reflected the dim glow of old street lamps. A man walked along the wet road with his shoulders slightly hunched, his jacket too thin to keep out the cold. He wasn't rushing home because rushing never changed the distance and his shoes were already soaked through. What mattered to him was making it home, where his children would be waiting, perhaps asking what he had brought for dinner, though he often returned with little. This father worked hard every single day. His hands showed it. They were rough with tiny cuts that came from lifting heavy things, repairing broken furniture for neighbors, or taking whatever job he could find. He didn't complain much. Complaining didn't put food on the table. But inside he often worried about rent, about how he would pay for his children's school books, about what tomorrow might bring. He lived in a small house, one with thin walls where the sound of the rain could be heard as if it were falling directly inside. His wife tried her best to make it a warm place, hanging small decorations the children made from paper or cloth, and cooking whatever she could manage with the little money he brought home. Sometimes when they had nothing but bread, she would still smile and say, "At least we are together." That thought gave him strength. On this particular evening, his back ached more than usual from carrying heavy boxes at a warehouse where he had worked for only a few days. It wasn't a permanent job. The manager had said they might not need him after the week ended. Still, he had accepted it gladly. Any work was better than none. He thought about his children as he walked. The eldest had recently asked why their shoes were always second-hand, and why they couldn't buy new ones like other kids. The father hadn't known how to answer. He had simply said, "Shoes are not what make us special. It's how we walk in them." He hoped his son understood, though he wasn't sure. The rain fell harder, soaking his jacket. He pulled it tighter, but the cold seeped through anyway. Cars rushed past him on the road, their headlights shining through the curtain of rain. Most people were in a hurry to get home to dry clothes and warm meals. He too wanted the same, though he knew there might only be a small pot of soup waiting. But soup made with care by his wife always felt like a feast to him. As he walked, his mind wandered to the dreams he once had. When he was younger, he wanted to open a small repair shop. He had always been good with his hands, fixing broken radios, mending chairs, even repairing bicycles for neighbors. But life hadn't given him that chance. With children to raise and bills to pay, dreams had to be set aside. He reminded himself that maybe one day, when things were better, he could think of it again. Despite the struggle, there was something in him that never faded: kindness. He had always believed that even if a man had little, he could still offer something to others. A smile, a helping hand, a kind word. That was what his own father had taught him, and it was a lesson he tried to pass on to his children. His neighborhood knew him as a man who would never walk past someone in need. If an old woman needed her fence mended, he was there. If a neighbor's child's toy was broken, he fixed it. Often he was not paid for these things, but he didn't mind. He believed kindness came back in ways one could never expect. On this wet evening, with his stomach empty and his heart heavy, he remembered those words. He told himself silently, "No matter how little I have, I will never stop being human. I will never stop caring." He tightened his grip on the small bag he carried. Inside were 2 loaves of bread, slightly stale, but it was all he could afford. He imagined the smile on his daughter's face when she saw him carry food, even if it wasn't much. That thought made his steps a little lighter. The rain didn't let up, and now the wind began to blow harder. He pulled his jacket hood over his head, though it didn't cover much. The road stretched ahead, long and lonely, but he kept walking. Each step was a reminder of why he kept going: his family. As he neared the corner of a long stretch of road, he noticed something unusual. A car was parked by the side, its hazard lights blinking through the downpour. The shape of a man stood near the hood, fumbling with something. The father slowed his pace for a moment. He could easily walk past. It wasn't his problem. He had enough worries of his own. His house was still a distance away, and he was tired, cold, and hungry. But something in him wouldn't let him just pass by. He looked at the stranger. The man was dressed in a neat coat, clearly not someone used to standing in the rain, struggling with a car engine. Cars sped past, splashing water onto the roadside, but no one stopped. Everyone had their own places to be. The father sighed. His hands ached from work, and his body longed for rest. Yet he found himself stepping toward the stranded driver. His voice, though tired, was steady as he called out, "Do you need help?" The stranger turned, surprised. Perhaps he hadn't expected anyone to stop in such weather. He nodded quickly, wiping rain from his face. "Yes, the car won't start. I don't know what's wrong." The father looked at the man's clean shoes, now muddy from standing by the roadside, and then at the engine. He had no special tools, only the few he carried in his bag for small jobs. But he knew engines. He had worked with them in the past, fixing old machines whenever someone asked. He placed his bread bag carefully on a dry patch of grass and stepped closer. The rain dripped from his hair as he leaned over the car hood, asking the man to turn the key. The engine sputtered weakly, then went silent. He listened carefully, then asked the man to try again. This time he spotted the issue. The stranger watched silently as the father's hands moved with familiarity. His jacket was soaked and his fingers were stiff from cold, but he kept working. The man by the car offered his umbrella, but the father shook his head. "It's all right," he said. "I've been wet all evening already." The stranger didn't know what to say. He simply held the light from his phone so the father could see better. For several minutes, only the sound of rain filled the air. Finally, the father adjusted a loose connection and wiped his hands on his jacket. "Try it now," he said. The stranger climbed into the car and turned the key. This time the engine roared to life. Relief spread across his face, and he quickly stepped out again. "You did it." Thank you so much." The father smiled faintly, lifting his bread bag from the ground. "It wasn't much. Just a loose wire," he said simply. The stranger reached into his pocket and pulled out some money. "Please take this. I can't let you go without something." But the father shook his head firmly. "No, I didn't do it for money. I just wanted to help, that's all." Before the stranger could insist, the father adjusted his hood and gave a small nod. "Take care," he said, then continued his walk in the rain. The stranger stood frozen for a moment, watching the figure of the poor father disappear down the road. He was deeply moved, but he didn't know how to respond. Finally, he got back into his car and drove away, his thoughts filled with the man who had helped him without asking for anything in return. Meanwhile, the father kept walking. His body was shivering now, but inside he felt a strange calm. He had no idea that this small moment, stopping to help a stranger on a rainy night, was about to change his life in ways he could never imagine. The night passed slowly in the small house. The father came home late, dripping wet, but his children still ran to him with open arms. They didn't care about the rain or the mud on his clothes. To them, their father's return always meant safety. He handed the bread to his wife, who smiled softly, grateful for even a little food. They sat together on the worn floor mat, sharing the meal. It wasn't much, but the warmth of family made it feel enough. That night, after the children were asleep, the father lay awake listening to the sound of rain dripping through a small crack in the roof. His mind went back to the car he had helped fix on the roadside. He wondered who that man was, what kind of life he lived, and whether he had reached home safely. For a moment he imagined what it would feel like to have a car of his own. Not a fancy one, just something that would keep the rain off and carry his family through the long walks. But he pushed the thought aside quickly. Dreams like that often made his heart heavier. The next morning came too soon. He rose before sunrise to head to the warehouse again. His legs still ached, but he forced himself forward. As he walked, he noticed the puddles had dried a little, but the ground still held the memory of the storm. At the warehouse, the manager looked at him with a tired expression. "Work's done for now," the man said flatly. "We won't need you today." The father's stomach sank. He had counted on those hours to bring home some money. But he only nodded. "I understand," he replied quietly. He didn't argue, because he knew arguing never created work. He walked back out onto the street, unsure of what to do. There was no money in his pocket, only the memory of last night's kindness. He wondered if life noticed such things. Did the world remember a man who gave his time in the rain to help someone he didn't know? Or did such acts disappear into silence, never to return? As he stood by the roadside thinking, a bus rattled past filled with people heading to their jobs. He wished he could be one of them, waking up each day with certainty about his work. Instead, his days were uncertain, like the shifting clouds above him. He decided to walk to a nearby neighborhood, hoping to find small repair jobs. He carried his few tools with him as always, because sometimes luck came in the form of a broken door hinge or a bicycle that needed fixing. He knocked at a few doors, asking politely if anyone had work. Most people shook their heads. Some closed the door before he could even finish speaking. By midday, his stomach growled with hunger. He hadn't eaten since the bread the night before. He sat on a stone bench, wiping sweat from his forehead, even though the air was cool. He thought about going home, but he didn't want to face his children with empty hands. As he sat there, he heard the sound of an engine slowing down nearby. A car pulled up along the side of the road. For a moment, he didn't look up. Cars stopped and started everywhere. It didn't mean anything to him, but then he noticed the driver stepping out and looking around. Something about the man seemed familiar. It was the stranger from the rainy night, the same man whose car he had fixed with cold, trembling hands. The father's first thought was surprise. Why would this man be here? He had expected never to see him again. He watched as the man scanned the street as if searching for someone. Then their eyes met. The stranger smiled, relief showing on his face, and walked quickly over. "I've been looking for you," he said. The father stood slowly, uncertain. "For me?" he asked. His voice carried confusion more than anything else. "Yes," the man nodded. "I've been trying to find you since that night. You helped me in the rain when no one else would. I couldn't just forget that." The father felt a bit embarrassed. "It was nothing," he said. "I only did what anyone should." But the stranger shook his head firmly. "No, it wasn't nothing. Most people passed me by. You stopped. You gave your time even though I could see you were tired. That means something." The father lowered his gaze, not used to such praise. His whole life he had been overlooked, unseen by most. To have someone speak so directly about his kindness made him feel almost uncomfortable. The stranger continued, "I want to repay you properly. Please, can we sit somewhere and talk?" The father hesitated. His instinct was to refuse, the same way he had refused money that night. But something about the stranger's sincerity made him pause. Finally, he nodded. "All right," he said quietly. They walked together to a small tea stall nearby. The father felt out of place sitting across from a man whose coat and shoes clearly spoke of comfort and wealth. But the stranger treated him with respect, speaking gently and listening closely. Over steaming cups of tea, the man asked about his life. At first, the father was reluctant. He wasn't used to sharing his struggles with strangers. But as the conversation went on, the words slipped out. He spoke about his children, about the constant search for work, about the dream he once had of opening a repair shop but never could. The stranger listened carefully, nodding often. He didn't interrupt, didn't look bored. When the father finished, there was a long silence between them, broken only by the clinking of cups at other tables. Finally, the man said softly, "You may not realize it, but your story touched me. People like you remind me of what matters most: honesty, hard work, kindness. And I don't want to let this chance pass. I want to do something for you." The father shook his head, his old instinct rising again. "I don't need anything," he said. "You don't owe me." The man leaned forward slightly. "Maybe I don't owe you, but I want to. Not because you asked, but because it's right. Sometimes in life we meet people for a reason." The father didn't know how to respond. He simply sipped his tea, feeling both hopeful and afraid. Hopeful because maybe this meeting meant something. Afraid because hope often led to disappointment. As they parted, the stranger gave him his phone number written on a card. "Call me tomorrow," he said. "I have an idea I'd like to share with you." The father accepted the card but didn't promise anything. He walked home slowly, the small piece of paper heavy in his pocket. His children ran to him as usual, asking what he had brought. This time he had nothing but the card. That night, as he lay awake, he pulled it from his pocket and stared at the numbers. He wondered if he should call. What if it was a false promise? What if the man had only spoken kindly but didn't truly mean it? He had been let down many times before, and he didn't want to feel that sting again. Yet deep down, something whispered that this was different. This wasn't chance anymore. Perhaps the rain had carried more than water that night. Perhaps it had carried fate. He placed the card carefully on the table beside him and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring a decision, and that decision, though he didn't yet know it, would lead him into a future far brighter than the one he had ever imagined. The morning light crept slowly into the small house, brushing across the cracked walls and the patched roof. The father woke before his children, as he often did, his thoughts already circling around the little card on the table. He picked it up and turned it over in his hands. The numbers were neatly written, not smudged by the rain as he had feared. He traced them with his finger, wondering again if he should use them. His wife noticed his silence. She sat beside him with a cup of weak tea and asked softly, "What troubles you this early?" He hesitated, then told her about the stranger. The car on the rainy night, the tea shop meeting, the card in his hand. She listened carefully, her eyes filled with quiet hope, though she didn't say much at first. Finally, she said, "Maybe this is the door we have been praying for. Maybe you should try." The father sighed. "I don't want to expect too much. You know how many times people say kind words but never return." She placed her hand on his. "True, but sometimes we must risk hope. If not for ourselves, then for the children." Her words stayed with him all morning. He looked at his children getting ready for school, wearing their worn-out shoes and carrying bags with frayed straps. They didn't complain much, but he could see their longing when they passed shops filled with bright new things. He wanted more for them, something beyond the cycle of struggle he had lived. By midday, he finally picked up the old phone they kept on the small shelf and dialed the number. His heart pounded as the line rang. He almost hung up, afraid of what the answer might be. But then the stranger's voice came through, calm and welcoming. "I'm glad you called," the man said. "I was hoping you would. Can you meet me today?" "I'd like to show you something." They agreed on a time and the father set out, nervous but curious. He walked a long distance, his shoes splashing through shallow puddles, until he reached the place they had arranged. To his surprise, the man was waiting by a car. Not the same one from that rainy night, but another, polished and shining. The stranger greeted him warmly. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I want to take you somewhere. Don't worry, it won't be far." The father hesitated for a moment, unused to riding in such a vehicle, but he got in quietly, sitting stiffly, his hands resting awkwardly on his lap. The car moved smoothly through the streets, a world different from the crowded buses or long walks he was used to. He stared out of the window at the passing shops, the tall buildings, the busy people rushing with purpose. Finally, the car stopped in front of a wide building with glass doors and neat signs. The stranger stepped out and gestured for him to follow. "This is where I work," he explained. "I wanted you to see it." Inside, the building was filled with movement. People in clean clothes walked quickly with papers in hand, speaking into phones, typing on computers. The father felt out of place in his old jacket, his worn shoes squeaking against the shiny floor. But the man walked beside him confidently, introducing him to a few staff members who greeted politely. They entered an office where the man gestured for him to sit. "I told you I wanted to do something for you," he began. "I wasn't just speaking kindly. I meant it. When you helped me that night, you reminded me of the values I want to keep close. Helping others, being honest, working hard. People like you are rare, and I think someone like you deserves more than just thanks." The father looked down, unsure what to say. His hands gripped the edge of the chair. The man continued. "I run a business. It's not small. I have many employees, many responsibilities. I see people come and go. Some who work only for money, some who don't care about honesty. But when I meet someone like you, I see potential. I want to offer you a place here. It won't be easy at first. You'll need to learn new things, but I believe you can do it. What do you think?" The father's heart raced. A real job, a stable one in a place like this? It felt impossible. He shook his head slowly. "I don't know. I don't have education like these people. I've never worked in an office. I only know how to fix things, carry loads, do small jobs. I don't belong here." The man leaned forward. "Don't say that. Skills can be learned. What matters is your character, and that you already have. I will help you. All I need is your willingness." The father sat in silence, overwhelmed. For years he had dreamed of something more, but those dreams always seemed out of reach. Now suddenly a door stood open. Finally he nodded, though his voice trembled. "If you truly believe I can, then I will try." The stranger smiled, extending his hand. "That's all I ask. We will start small. Come tomorrow and I'll show you the work. We'll take it step by step." The father shook his hand, still in disbelief. As he left the office, his mind swirled. He couldn't decide if this was real or if he would wake up the next morning and find it all gone. The ride back home felt shorter than the ride there. When he stepped into his small house that evening, his children ran to him again. But this time he carried not bread or coins, he carried news. He told his wife first, carefully explaining what had happened, the offer he had been given. Her eyes widened, and for the first time in a long while, tears of hope filled them. She clasped his hands tightly. "This could change everything," she whispered. The children listened eagerly, not understanding all the details but sensing their father's excitement. They asked questions, their voices full of wonder. "Will we be able to buy new books? Will we have more food? Will we get new shoes?" He laughed softly, tears pricking his own eyes. "Maybe, little by little. But remember, it's not about what we have. It's about staying honest and kind no matter what." That night, sleep came easier, though his mind was still restless. He lay awake for a while, staring at the ceiling, imagining a future he had never dared to imagine before, a steady job, a chance to prove himself, a way to give his children more than scraps of bread and patched clothes. But along with hope came fear. What if he failed? What if he couldn't keep up with the others? What if the man changed his mind? These thoughts circled in his head. Yet deep down he knew he couldn't turn away. Opportunity had knocked, and he had to open the door. The next morning, as the sun rose, he prepared himself. He washed his old jacket carefully, brushed his shoes as best as he could, and told his wife he would do his best. She placed her hand on his cheek and said, "That's all we need from you. Do your best. The rest will follow." With those words echoing in his heart, he stepped out into the new day, carrying not just tools in his bag, but also the fragile beginning of hope. He had no idea where this path would lead, but he knew one thing clearly. The simple act of helping a stranger in the rain had opened a road he never thought he would walk. And this road was only beginning. The next morning felt different. The father rose earlier than usual, his heart pounding with both fear and excitement. He washed quickly, brushed his old jacket again, and tried to smooth out the wrinkles in his shirt. It was still the same worn clothing, but he wanted to present himself as best as he could. His wife helped adjust his collar, smiling in quiet encouragement. "You look ready," she said softly. He gave a small laugh. "I don't feel ready, but I will try." His children gathered around the door, curious. They wished him luck with bright eyes, though they didn't fully understand where he was going. To them, their father had always been strong, always a protector. They didn't see his doubts, only his steady presence. With a deep breath, he stepped outside. The air was cool, the streets slowly filling with people beginning their day. He walked quickly, his legs carrying him to the place where the stranger had told him to come. When he arrived, the building loomed before him once again, tall and polished, so different from the world he knew. He paused at the entrance, staring at the glass doors. Part of him wanted to turn back, to retreat into the comfort of the life he already knew, even if it was filled with hardship. But then he thought of his children's faces, their questions about new books and shoes, their quiet hopes. That thought gave him courage. Inside, the stranger greeted him warmly. "I'm glad you came," he said. "Let me show you around." The father followed him through the halls, his eyes wide. Everywhere he looked, people moved with purpose. They typed quickly, carried papers, spoke into phones with confidence. He felt like a fish out of water, unsure where he fit in this busy place. But the stranger noticed his unease. "Don't worry," he said kindly. "Everyone starts somewhere. You don't need to know everything today. We'll take it step by step." The father nodded, grateful for the reassurance. He was introduced to a small group of workers who would guide him in his tasks. At first, the work seemed overwhelming. There were machines and tools he had never used, systems he didn't understand, and people who looked at him with curiosity. Some greeted him kindly, while others seemed doubtful, whispering quietly to each other. He tried not to listen, though their voices stung. His first assignment was simple: carry and arrange supplies in the storeroom. This was familiar to him. His strong hands lifted the boxes with ease, and he arranged them carefully, just as he had always done with neighbors' belongings or at temporary jobs. Though it wasn't glamorous, it was honest work, and he did it with quiet determination. As the day went on, he was asked to assist with small repairs, fixing a loose shelf, tightening a broken handle, checking a piece of equipment that wouldn't start. Here his skills showed clearly. With simple tools and steady hands, he solved problems quickly, surprising some of the workers who hadn't expected much from him. The stranger watched with interest. He saw the way the father worked, with patience, with focus, with pride in even the smallest task. "This is what I meant," the man thought to himself. Character matters more than polish. When the day finally ended, the father was exhausted. His back ached, his hands were sore, but his heart felt strangely light. For the first time in a long while, he felt that maybe he had a place. Maybe he could build something more than survival. That evening, when he returned home, his children noticed the difference. He didn't bring food or gifts, but he carried something invisible, a spark of hope. His wife saw it too, in the way he spoke, in the way he carried himself. "How was it?" she asked. He sat down heavily, smiling faintly. "Hard," he admitted, "but good. They gave me work. Real work." She clasped his hand tightly. That's all we needed to hear. In the days that followed, he returned to the building each morning. Slowly, he began to learn more. He asked questions even if they made him feel foolish. He watched others carefully, picking up habits and skills. Some laughed quietly when he stumbled, but he ignored them. Others offered help, showing him how to use the machines properly. He thanked them sincerely, never too proud to learn. At home, he shared stories with his children, telling them about the things he saw and did. Their eyes grew wide with wonder. One day, he told them, "You will see that even the smallest step can lead to a big road." One afternoon, a challenge came. A piece of important equipment broke down, and none of the regular workers could figure out the problem quickly. The supervisor grew frustrated, pacing the floor. The father stood quietly nearby, watching. He recognized the sound the machine made. It reminded him of old engines he had fixed in the past. He stepped forward hesitantly. "May I try?" he asked. The supervisor looked doubtful, but the stranger, who happened to be present, nodded. "Go ahead." The father knelt by the machine, listening carefully, feeling the parts with his hands. After a few minutes, he adjusted a piece that had come loose, tightened a connection, and asked them to start it again. The machine roared back to life, smooth and steady. The room fell silent for a moment. Then the supervisor's face softened with relief. "Good work," he said simply. The workers around him looked at the father with new eyes. Some of the doubt faded, replaced with respect. He didn't boast, didn't raise his voice. He only wiped his hands on his jacket and smiled faintly. "Just needed a little care," he said. That night, when he told his family about it, his children cheered. "See, Papa, you can do it. You're the best." His wife's eyes shone with pride. "I told you," she whispered. Sometimes doors open when we least expect it. Days turned into weeks. The father's place in the company grew stronger. The stranger kept his word, guiding him, encouraging him, believing in him when he doubted himself. Slowly, he began to feel that he truly belonged, that he wasn't just a poor man filling space, but a worker valued for his skill and heart. At home, life began to change in small ways. There was a little more food on the table. The children had notebooks with unbroken pages, pencils that weren't worn to stubs. His wife could rest easier, not constantly worrying about tomorrow's meal. The house was still small, the roof still cracked, but laughter filled it more often. One evening, as he sat with his children under the dim light of their single lamp, he thought back to that rainy night. If he had walked past that car, if he had told himself it wasn't his problem, none of this would have happened. His life would still be the same, weighed down by endless struggle. But he hadn't walked past. He had stopped, offered help, and in doing so, unknowingly opened the door to a new life. The thought filled him with gratitude. Gratitude not just for the stranger who had believed in him, but also for the lesson life had shown. That kindness given freely can return in ways beyond imagination. And yet he knew the story was not finished. This was only the beginning of a new chapter, one that could lead to even greater change. For himself, for his family, and perhaps even for others who looked at him and saw that hope was always possible. The months moved forward and the father's life slowly began to shift. At first, the changes were small. An extra bag of rice at home, a few coins left after paying for rent, a smile on his wife's face that came more easily. But as weeks turned into months, those small changes grew into something greater. He no longer woke up each morning wondering where his next job would come from. He had a place, a steady role, and for the first time in years, his steps toward work felt lighter. Every morning he arrived on time, sometimes even earlier than expected. His colleagues, who once doubted him, began to respect his quiet determination. They saw how he approached every task with patience, never rushing, never cutting corners. Whether it was lifting boxes or fixing complicated equipment, he worked with the same care. His honesty and reliability soon made him someone others turned to when problems arose. The stranger who had given him this chance often checked in on him. He didn't treat him as just another worker, but as someone whose journey mattered. "You remind me why I started this business, Ling," the man told him once. "It wasn't only for profit. It was to build something meaningful, to create opportunities for people who deserve them." Those words stayed with the father. He didn't see himself as someone special, but hearing that gave him strength. It made him want to give his best, not just for his own family, but for the people who believed in him. At home, the transformation was even more visible. His children now went to school with proper books and pencils. They no longer sat in class embarrassed by worn-out shoes. His eldest, who once asked why their things were always second-hand, now walked with more confidence, his head held higher. The father's wife noticed the difference too. She saw how her husband carried himself with a new energy, not weighed down by hopelessness. Their evenings were no longer filled with worry over empty cupboards, but with laughter, stories, and simple joys. They still lived in their small house, the roof still leaked during heavy rain, but they had something they hadn't felt in years: peace of mind. One day, the stranger called him into his office. "You've been working here for some time now," he began, "and you've shown me something important. You've shown me that a person's worth is not measured by their clothes, their money, or their education, but by their heart. I'd like to offer you more responsibility. Will you accept a supervisory role?" The father was stunned. He had never imagined such words would be spoken to him. A supervisor? Him? The man who once carried tools in a worn bag and walked miles in the rain? He could hardly believe it. He hesitated, then said quietly, "I'm not sure if I'm ready." The stranger smiled. "You're more ready than you think. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to be willing, and you've already proven that." With trembling hands, the father accepted. And with that, his life took another turn. He was now guiding others, teaching younger workers, showing them the same patience and honesty he had lived by. He didn't raise his voice or command with pride. Instead, he led by example. Slowly, the workers who once whispered behind his back began to admire him. They saw not just a supervisor, but a man who had walked in their shoes and understood their struggles. At home, his children noticed the change too. "Papa is a leader now," they told their friends proudly. The father only smiled, never letting pride overtake humility. He reminded his children, "Titles don't matter as much as kindness. Remember that." Seasons passed, and the family's life grew more stable. They saved little by little, enough to repair the roof, enough to buy a second-hand bicycle for the children, enough to plan for the future. The father no longer feared unexpected knocks on the door from landlords or creditors. Instead, he looked forward to each day, grateful for the chance to work honestly and provide. Sometimes late at night, he sat quietly by the window, remembering the moment it all began. A rainy night, a broken car, a decision to stop when so many others had walked past. If he had ignored that stranger, if he had chosen his own comfort over kindness, his life would still be what it once was. But because he stopped, because he offered his hands freely, everything had changed. One evening, his eldest child asked him, "Papa, why did you help that man in the rain when you didn't have to?" He thought for a moment, then replied gently, "Because helping others is what makes us human. Even when we have little, we can always give kindness, and sometimes kindness returns to us in ways we never expect." The child nodded slowly, taking in those words. It was a lesson he hoped his children would carry long after he was gone. As the years moved forward, the father became more than just an employee. He became a trusted friend to many, a mentor to younger workers, and a symbol of hope in his community. People who once saw him as just another poor man now came to him for advice.
He never let success change who he was.
His jacket was still simple, his words still humble, but his heart carried a quiet strength that everyone felt. One afternoon, the stranger invited him to a community event. There, in front of many people, he spoke about the father's story, about how a poor man had stopped to help a stranger in the rain, and through that act of kindness, not only changed his own life but inspired others. The father stood quietly as people applauded, his face flushed with modesty. He didn't seek attention. He only hoped that someone in the crowd would hear the story and choose kindness too. When he returned home that night, his wife placed her hand in his and whispered, "See what one choice did? One night, one act, and look at how far we've come." He smiled softly, his eyes filled with gratitude. It wasn't just one act, he said. It was the chance that act created, and it was your strength and the children's love that carried me forward. The house was still small, the world outside still full of struggles, but inside their hearts, there was light. A light born from kindness, from honesty, from the courage to hope. The father leaned back, looking at his children playing in the corner, and thought quietly to himself, life had not been easy, but it had taught him something important. When we give without expecting, when we choose kindness even in hardship, life has a way of surprising us. Sometimes it changes everything. And in that moment he realized something even deeper, that his story was not just about survival or success. It was about the power of kindness to alter the course of life, forever.